My mother left me at a train station. She bet $50 I wouldn't make it home. I was 12. I had $9 20 years later. They called me 29 times. That day didn't destroy me. It erased them. My mother yelled those words out the passenger window of a moving car while I stood crying inside Union Station in Chicago. I was 12 years old. I had $9 in my pocket. My father was driving and laughing. My mother was holding up a $50 bill in her hand like a trophy. I did not find my way home that night. I found a station employee named Maria who saved my life, a foster family who adopted me, and a name that did not belong to the girl those people had thrown away. 20 years later, on a Tuesday morning in April, my phone showed 29 missed calls from an Illinois area code. They had finally found me. They had also lost everything: their house, their stores, their reputation, and the youngest daughter they thought they could keep. This is the story of what I did when they begged me to come back. My name is Sophia Bennett. I am 32 years old. I run a small graphic design studio in Denver, Colorado. I am married to a man named Alex who has never once raised his voice at me in 8 years. We have a rescue dog named Max who sleeps on my left foot every night. The name on my driver's license has been Sophia Bennett since 2010. The name on my birth certificate is Jennifer Caldwell. I have not used Jennifer Caldwell in 20 years. She was a 12-year-old girl in a Navy school sweatshirt with cheap sneakers and $9 from her allowance, and she was left to die in a train station in October of 2006 by the two people who were supposed to make sure she did not. She did not die. But the woman she became did not keep her name. Before we go further, if these stories move you, subscribe. Hit that like button. It costs you nothing, means everything to us. Now let me tell you about a house in Willow Creek, Illinois, where cruelty was always called something else. My biological parents were named Douglas and Lorraine Caldwell. Doug and Lori. They owned a chain of 3 home goods stores called Caldwell Home Center across the rural counties west of Chicago. Doug was 41 the year they left me at the station. He had the build of a man who had stopped lifting but had not stopped flexing. Lori was 38. She wore pearl earrings to PTA meetings and had a habit of laughing at other people's pain in a way that made the laughter sound like a compliment if you weren't paying attention. They had 2 daughters. Me, Jennifer, the older one, and Hannah, 4 years younger. Hannah was 8 in October of 2006. She did not come on the Chicago trip. That detail matters. Our house at 1422 Linden Court in Willow Creek looked, from the outside, like every other house on the block. White siding, a blue door. A wreath that changed every season. The Caldwells in cursive on a yard sign. The lawn mowed every Saturday. To the neighbors, we were the family that proved hard work paid off. Inside the house, there was no such family. Inside the house, my mother had been running a slow, quiet experiment on her oldest daughter for as long as I could remember. The experiment was simple. It tested how much fear a child could absorb before the child stopped being a child. She called the experiments lessons. That was always her word. They didn't just hurt me, they gambled on me. When I was 6 and afraid of the dark, the lesson was being made to sit alone in the basement for 40 minutes with the lights off. The world is dark, Jennifer. Get used to it. When I was 8 and my sneakers had a hole, I was left alone on a mall bench for almost 3 hours. When they came back, my father told my mother she owed him $20 because he had bet she would be back before I moved. When I was 10 and cried after some boys mocked me at a youth football game, I was driven to the far side of the parking lot, told to get out, and watched from the rear view as my parents drove away. They came back almost an hour later with fast food for themselves and an apology for nobody. The bets were the part that nobody outside the house ever understood. Doug and Lori bet on me constantly, $20 if I'd cry first, $40 if I'd ask a stranger for help, $100 once on whether I'd break before bedtime if Lori refused to feed me dinner. The money was not the point. The point was that my fear was theirs to wager. By the time I was 12, I had developed the kind of stillness that abused children develop. I did not flinch in public. I did not cry in front of guests. I drew constantly, in the margins of every notebook on the backs of receipts. I drew rooms with locked doors. I drew train windows full of light. I drew women standing on cliffs alone with no one behind them. I did not know I was drawing my way out. I just knew that on paper, nobody could bet on me. The cruelty was never invisible. That is the part I want every adult watching this to hear. My third-grade teacher, Mrs. Marisol Esperanza Quinn, filed a CPS report in March of 2003 after I came to school 3 days in a row with a hand-shaped bruise on my upper arm. The report was investigated and closed 2 weeks later. Status: unsubstantiated. My 5th-grade gym teacher, Tova Rasmussen, filed a second CPS report in November of 2005 after she found welts across my back during a private check-in. Different social worker. Same outcome. Unsubstantiated. I am not telling you this to blame those 2 women. They are the only adults from my Willow Creek childhood I would ever want to thank. They saw me. They tried. The system around them did not. My best friend in 5th grade was Camille, Mrs. Esperanza Quinn's daughter, the only person in my life who had ever asked me, point blank, "Jenny, are you okay at home?" I had told her no. Once, on the swings at Willow Creek Elementary, in October of 2005, she had told her mother. Her mother had filed the second report. Camille's family moved to Schaumburg in the summer of 2006. I did not see her again until I was 24. The third person who saw was a Caldwell Home Center employee, a stockroom manager named Ernest Whitfield, 54 years old, ex-Marine, who had worked for my parents for 9 years. Ernest watched me one Saturday afternoon, sitting on a folding chair in the back office while my mother yelled at me for a misplaced clipboard. He came up to me afterward and quietly handed me his business card. He said, "Jennifer, if anything ever happens that you need a phone call made, you call this number. Day or night, I mean it." I kept that business card in my underwear drawer for 14 months. I never used it, but I kept it. And the night I was finally placed with the Bennett family in Chicago, my caseworker found that business card folded inside my small backpack. She tracked Ernest down. He drove from Willow Creek to the Bennett house in Lincoln Park at 1 a.m. in October rain to make sure, with his own eyes, that I was safe. He stayed in my life. He still is. He is 73 now. He gave me away at my wedding because Mark Bennett, my adoptive father, said Ernest had earned that walk down the aisle just as much as he had. Ernest cried. Mark cried. I cried. Then we all laughed because we are emotionally capable of doing both, which is something I learned from people who were not Doug and Lori Caldwell. What pushed everything over the edge in October of 2006 was a B+ in art class. Not math, not science. Art. I had spent my entire fall semester pouring myself into a portfolio assignment. 12 drawings on a single theme. I chose windows. Mrs. Casaluccio gave me a B+ and a handwritten note that said, "Jennifer, these are extraordinary." The B+ reflects only that 2 drawings were turned in late. Your work is the strongest I have seen from a 7th grader in 15 years of teaching. Please keep going. I brought the portfolio home on a Friday afternoon. I was proud. I had never been proud of anything I'd brought home before. Lori read the note. She looked at the grade. She looked at me. She said, "A B+, in art. Jennifer, how does a girl who spends every waking minute drawing get a B+ in the one subject she supposedly cares about?" Doug laughed and said, "Maybe she's getting lazy, Lore." That night I sat in my bedroom pretending to do homework. I heard them in the kitchen. Lori said, "She needs a lesson she will never forget." Doug said, "I'd bet money on that." The next morning, they were cheerful in a way that made me want to throw up. Lori made pancakes. Doug poured me orange juice. They told me we were taking a day trip to Chicago, just the 3 of us. Hannah was going to spend the day at our Aunt Marlene's. For one stupid second, I thought it was an apology. I should have known what kind of family makes pancakes before the worst day of your life. We parked near Union Station around 11:47 a.m. on Saturday, October 14th, 2006. I remember the time because there was a digital clock on the parking garage, and I have, for the rest of my life, looked at digital clocks first. The station was the biggest building I had ever stood inside. Vaulted ceilings, marble floors. People with rolling suitcases moving in every direction like a current. I held the strap of my backpack so tight my knuckles went white. Lori pointed to a marble pillar near the main entrance. She said, Wait right here. We're going to move the car and grab lunch. 15 minutes. Maybe 20. I asked if I could go with them. Doug laughed loud enough that two strangers turned. He said, "Jennifer, you're 12, not 2. Lori leaned close. She said, "Don't embarrass me in public." I nodded. I stood by the pillar. I watched them walk away. I checked the big station clock every 2 minutes. 11:51, 12:04, 12:23, 12:47, 1:14, 1:38. By 1:38 p.m., my chest had started to hurt in a way I now recognize as the early edge of a panic attack but did not have a word for at the time. I had $9 in my pocket. I had no phone. I had no address written down. I did not know how the trains worked. I did not know our home phone number from memory. I stayed by the pillar because they had told me not to move. At 2:14 p.m., I saw the car. Through the front windows of the station, the big arched windows that face Canal Street, I saw our gray Honda Pilot move slowly past the curb outside. My whole body jolted with a relief so complete that I almost laughed out loud. I ran to the glass. I waved with both arms. I was sure in that 1 second that they were coming back to find me. Doug was driving. Lori was in the passenger seat. Both of them were looking right at me. Doug smiled first. It was not the smile of a relieved father who had found his daughter. It was the smile of a man watching a punchline land exactly the way he had wanted it to. Lori rolled her window down halfway. She leaned out into the cold October air. She held up a folded $50 bill. She yelled, loud enough that I could hear her through traffic noise and a layer of glass. "I bet you $50 you can't find your way home, Jennifer." Then she laughed. Doug laughed with her. He lifted one hand off the wheel and gave me a thumbs up, that stupid little thumbs up, and the Pilot pulled forward into traffic and disappeared around the corner onto Adams Street. I stood at that glass for a long time. That was the moment I understood, with the kind of clarity a child should never have to develop, that what was happening to me was not an accident. It had never been an accident. The lessons had never been lessons. My fear had always been the point. I stopped waiting. I started moving. If you've been watching for a while, do me a quick favor, subscribe and hit that like button. Costs you nothing, means everything. I walked the station for almost 2 hours after that. I remember the smell of cinnamon from a pretzel stand. I remember being too embarrassed to ask anyone for help because Doug and Lori had spent 12 years training that out of me. I remember sitting briefly inside the women's restroom because I needed to cry in a place where nobody could see me. The woman who saw me was named Maria Domings. She was 53. She had worked for Amtrak as a station services supervisor for 19 years. She had walked past me, she told me later, 4 separate times. The 5th time, she stopped. She said, in a voice so calm it almost did not match the words, "Sweetheart. How long have you been here?" I tried to lie. I said I was waiting for my parents. She said, "Honey, I have been watching you for an hour and a half. Your parents are not coming. Where do you live?" I started crying so hard I could not breathe. I told her everything. I told her about the bet. I told her about the $50 bill. I told her my mother had laughed. Maria did not flinch. She did not gasp. She crouched down so her eyes were level with mine and she said, "Okay, you are safe right now. I am calling station security and a family services officer. You are not going to be alone for the rest of this day. Do you understand me?" I nodded. She held my hand all the way to her supervisor's office. Her hand was warm. Mine was cold. Within 40 minutes, 3 things happened that changed my life. 1. Amtrak police officer Idris Korhonen arrived. He pulled the security camera footage covering the Canal Street curb between 2:00 and 2:30 p.m. The footage clearly showed a gray Honda Pilot slowing at the curb, a passenger leaning out the window, and the vehicle leaving without picking up a child who had visibly been waiting at the entrance for over 2 hours. 2. Officer Korhonen contacted Illinois State Police, who pulled my parents' DMV records and called the home number. Lori answered. She admitted on a recorded line that she and Doug had left Jennifer at the station to teach her independence and that they would drive back tomorrow if necessary. Officer Korhonen told her, "Mrs. Caldwell, leaving a 12-year-old child unattended in a major transit hub is not a parenting decision. In Illinois, it is a Class 4 felony. You and your husband are going to be charged. Do not leave Will County. 3. A family services officer named Adiz Akpan arrived from Cook County DCFS around 6:30 p.m. She sat with me for 2 hours. She asked me about Hannah. I told her Hannah was at our Aunt Marlene's. Adiz made a phone call. By 9:14 p.m. that night, Hannah had been picked up and placed with our maternal grandmother in Plainfield, Illinois. I want to underline that. Hannah was removed too. She was 8 years old. Adiz Akpan, may she be promoted, may her children be blessed, refused to leave a second Caldwell daughter in a house where the first one had been bet on for 12 years. I spent that first night with an emergency foster family in Lincoln Park. Their names were Mark and Laura Bennett. Mark was a freelance commercial photographer with ink stains on his fingers. Laura taught preschool at a Montessori on Fullerton Avenue. They had no biological children. They had been licensed foster parents for 6 years. Their house smelled like onions, sautéing in olive oil and old books. There was a lamp on in the entryway that nobody turned off. There was a dog bed in the corner that belonged to a 14-year-old golden retriever named Cinnamon, who slept through my entire first night, and then, in the morning, came over and put her gray muzzle against my knee like she had been waiting for me. Laura asked if I wanted spaghetti or soup. Mark asked if I wanted the hall light on or off. Nobody made me explain anything. When I cried at the dinner table after 2 bites, Laura just put a hand on my back and said, "Sweetheart, eat what you can. We have leftovers tomorrow." I want you to understand something that took me a decade to fully process. A stranger at a train station, Maria, had shown me more kindness in 15 minutes than my own mother had shown me in 12 years. The kindness of strangers in 2006 is what made me believe that strangers, sometimes, are just family you have not met yet. The criminal case moved fast. Doug and Lori were arrested Saturday night at 11:47 p.m. The DA filed 3 counts each: child abandonment, a Class 4 felony, endangering the life or health of a child, a Class 3 felony, and cruelty to children, a Class A misdemeanor. Their attorney negotiated a plea by January 2007. Doug and Lori each pled guilty to 1 count of child endangerment as a Class 3 misdemeanor, accepted 24 months of probation, 200 hours of community service, mandatory parenting classes, and a permanent entry on the Illinois Child Abuse Registry. The DA, a woman named Maryse Levong, told me at the sentencing, looked me right in my 12-year-old eyes and said, "Jennifer, I wanted more. The plea is what we could get. I am sorry." I told her the registry entry would follow them for the rest of their lives. That mattered to me more than the prison time. The Bennetts adopted me on November 12, 2008. I chose the name Sophia because Laura's grandmother had been Sophia. I chose Bennett because it was theirs. Sophia Bennett went to Northside College Prep in Chicago. Sophia Bennett got into the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. Sophia Bennett graduated in 2014 with a BFA in graphic design and a 3.8 GPA. Sophia Bennett's first job was at a Denver branding firm. She moved to Denver in 2014, partly because the program was strong and partly because Denver was 1,003 miles from Willow Creek, Illinois. Sophia Bennett met Alex Bow at a housewarming party in 2017. On their 3rd date, she told him she had complicated family history. On their 12th, she told him about Union Station. He did not interrupt. He did not say everything happens for a reason. He reached across the table, took her hand, and said, "Sophia, that should never have happened to you." They married in 2019. Mark Bennett walked her down the aisle. Ernest Whitfield walked her halfway, then handed her off to Mark. A thing Sophia had choreographed 8 months in advance, a thing both men cried over, a thing Laura had to fix Sophia's eye makeup for in a back room of the venue while laughing through her own tears. Sophia Bennett opened her own studio, Linden and Light Design, in 2021. She named it Linden after Linden Court, the street in Willow Creek where she had grown up afraid, because she was 28 years old and had decided that the word Linden was going to belong to her now. In 2023, the studio launched a passion project, a free directory app called Main Street Map that let small towns list their independently owned businesses on a single beautifully designed regional platform. She did it because the small bookstore in her own neighborhood in Denver was about to close, and she wanted to help. By 2025, Main Street Map had over 4,200 small businesses listed across Illinois, Iowa, Wisconsin, and Indiana. I built something that helped small businesses survive. I didn't target them, but their stores couldn't survive it. One of those towns was Willow Creek, Illinois. I did not know it at the time. A volunteer had added it to the directory in March of 2024. Willow Creek had 41 small businesses listed by the end of that year, all of them competitors of Caldwell Home Center. Caldwell Home Center sales dropped 19% in 2024. They dropped another 31% in the first half of 2025. The family scandal hit Facebook in late 2025. The chain closed its first location in September, the second in November, the third in January 2026. I did not bring down Caldwell Home Center. I built a thing that helped small towns shop local. The math just worked. I want to say that out loud because I want every woman watching this to understand. When you build a real life, when you do real work, when you put something good into the world, sometimes the people who tried to break you end up standing in the rubble of their own choices. You did not push the building down, you just stopped holding it up. Doug and Lori had built a brittle thing. Brittle things break. They broke in March 2026, Tuesday morning, April 14, 2026, 7:18 a.m. I woke up to my phone vibrating on the nightstand, 29 missed calls, not one apology. I did not open the voicemails right away. I went downstairs, I made coffee, I sat at the kitchen table. Alex came down 20 minutes later. He looked at my face and he said, "Sophia, what?" I said, 29 missed calls from Illinois. He sat down, he put his hand on top of mine. He said, "Do you want me to listen first?" I said, "No, I have to be the one." I opened the first voicemail. It was not Lori, it was not Doug, it was Hannah. Her voice was older than I had expected. She was 28 now, married, a son named Theo, 3 years old, a nursing degree from Illinois State. She lived in Champaign. The voice on the recording was tired, careful, and clearly someone who had rehearsed exactly what she was going to say. She said, "Jenny, I'm sorry, I know you don't go by that anymore. Sophia, this is Hannah. I have not called in 20 years because I was told for most of them that you didn't want to hear from any of us. I know now that wasn't true. Mom is sick. Stage 4. There's something they want from you. Legally, I don't think you should give it to them. But I need you to know what they're trying to do. Please call me, not them, me." I called Hannah back at 8:04 a.m. Mountain Time. She picked up on the second ring. She cried for the first 90 seconds. I let her. Then she told me what was happening. Doug and Lori had filed a petition in Will County Probate Court 3 weeks earlier, an attempt to amend our maternal grandmother Wilhelmina's 1998 family trust to include both biological daughters as residual beneficiaries. Wilhelmina had passed in 2018. Her trust held approximately $640,000. Wilhelmina had specifically named Hannah and excluded Jennifer Caldwell, on the grounds that Jennifer Caldwell had been removed from the family by court order in 2007. Wilhelmina had not understood, or had not wanted to understand, that Jennifer Caldwell was now Sophia Bennett. Doug and Lori were trying, in 2026, to use my legal disappearance to access a trust that Hannah was about to inherit outright. Their angle: convince a probate judge that Jennifer Caldwell was a missing person, and that as her surviving biological parents, they had standing to claim her share. They did not know I was alive and findable. They did not know I was Sophia Bennett. They did not know I had a husband, a studio, a city, a name, a dog, a life. The 29 missed calls had not come from Doug and Lori. They had come from Hannah, who had figured it out 4 weeks earlier when she'd searched for me on LinkedIn and found a profile photo of a woman who had her exact same nose and her exact same chin. Hannah had hired her own attorney, a Champaign woman named Quincy Aldemir, and Quincy had told her, "Hannah, you need to find your sister and warn her. They are about to legally erase her existence in court." I sat at my kitchen table for a long time after I hung up with Hannah. Alex made me a second cup of coffee. Max pressed against my leg. The morning sun came through the kitchen window and landed on the back of my hands. I thought about a 12-year-old girl standing at a marble pillar in Union Station while her mother yelled $50 out of a moving car. I thought about a thumbs up. I thought about how a thumbs up given to a child you have abandoned is, in some quiet way, the most accurate confession a parent can ever make. It says, "I am proud of myself for what I am doing to you." I picked up my phone, I called Quincy Aldemir. I said, "Quincy, what does it take for me to legally appear in this case and make sure Doug and Lori Caldwell never touch a dime of my grandmother's trust?" Quincy said, "Sophia, I can have it filed by Friday. Are you willing to come to Illinois?" I said yes, with one condition. "I want them in the room." She said, "Why?" I said, "Because they bet $50 I couldn't find my way home. I want to hand them the bill." I flew into Chicago on Wednesday, April 22nd. Alex came with me. Mark and Laura drove down from Northbrook. Ernest Whitfield drove in from Willow Creek. Hannah drove up from Champaign with her 3-year-old son Theo and her husband Devonte Hill. We had dinner Wednesday night at a small Italian place in the West Loop. There were 8 of us at the table. 6 of them were people who had become my family in the 20 years since Doug and Lori had left me in a station. The 7th was Hannah, who had just become my family again. The 8th was Theo, who fell asleep on Hannah's lap halfway through the bread course. I held Theo for 40 minutes while Hannah ate her first hot meal in a long time. His hair smelled like baby shampoo and a little bit of ketchup. I had never held a child before. I had been afraid of children, quietly, for 20 years, because I did not know if I would be able to be near one without becoming the woman who had been left in a station. Theo solved that for me in 40 minutes. Thursday morning, April 23rd, 2026. 9:47 a.m. Will County Probate Court, Joliet, Illinois. Doug and Lori entered the courtroom at 9:42 a.m. I had not seen them in 20 years. Doug had aged badly. Lori was in a navy blazer and pearl earrings, the same uniform from the 2007 sentencing. Her hair was thinner. She had lost weight. She was wearing makeup that did not quite hide what was underneath. She saw me. She did not recognize me at first. Then she did. Her hand went to her mouth. Doug saw me a second later. He said audibly, "Jesus Christ." Their attorney, Burgess Halsapple, the same DUI lawyer from 2007, now 71, looked at his clients, looked at me, looked at Quincy, and visibly did the math. He turned to Doug and said, in a whisper that everyone in the first 3 rows heard, "Doug, we need to withdraw the petition, now." Judge Benshausen looked over her glasses. She said, "Counselor, is there a motion before the court?" Burgess stood up. He said, "Your Honor, my clients are withdrawing the petition, with prejudice." Judge Benshausen looked at Quincy. Quincy stood up. She said, "Your Honor, the court should be aware that the petitioners attempted to access trust funds belonging to a person they had voluntarily surrendered parental rights to in 2007 by filing a probate action that mischaracterized her as missing or deceased. My client, Sophia Bennett, formerly Jennifer Caldwell, is present in the courtroom. She is alive, lucid, and would like to be heard." Judge Benshausen looked at me. She said, "Mrs. Bennett, please approach the lectern." I walked to the lectern. I did not look at Doug and Lori. I looked at the judge. I said, "Your Honor, my name is Sophia Margaret Bennett. I was born Jennifer Lynn Caldwell on March 14, 1994. My parental rights were terminated by this court on February 11, 2007, after my biological parents, the petitioners in this case, left me alone in Union Station in Chicago at age 12 while betting $50 on whether I could find my way home. I am here to renounce, on the record, any and all claim to any and all assets intended for me by my maternal grandmother. I am also here to formally object to the petitioner's attempt to access funds intended for my sister Hannah Caldwell Hill, who is the sole rightful beneficiary of our grandmother's trust. I am asking this court to dismiss the petition with prejudice and to award attorney's fees and costs to my sister." Judge Benshausen said, "Mrs. Bennett, you are renouncing your share." I said, "Your Honor, I never had a share. I had a grandmother who did not know how to find me." The share goes to my sister, every penny. Hannah in the second row started crying. The petition was dismissed with prejudice. Petitioners ordered to pay attorneys' fees and costs. I turned around. I walked to their row. I did not stop. I leaned down. I had carried that $50 for 20 years. I put a single folded $50 bill on the wooden bench between them. I said, very quietly, "Mom, Dad, you bet $50 I couldn't find my way home. I did. I just didn't come back to yours." I walked out of the courtroom. Hannah caught up to me in the hallway. She was crying. Theo was asleep on her shoulder. She said, "Sophia, was that the line?" I said, "It was the line, Hannah. It was the line for 20 years." She put her free arm around me. We stood like that in the hallway of the Will County Courthouse for a long time. Mark and Laura found us. Ernest found us. Alex found us. We stood in a small circle of family in a marble hallway, and a court bailiff walked past and pretended not to look. That was the last time I ever saw Doug and Lori Caldwell. Lori passed away in November 2026, 7 months after the hearing. Hannah told me by text. I did not attend the funeral. I sent Hannah a card. Doug entered an assisted living facility in Joliet in early 2027 after a second stroke. He has asked about me twice. I have not responded. The Caldwell Home Center stores remained closed. The 1422 Linden Courthouse was foreclosed in summer 2026. A young couple bought it and gutted the kitchen. The wreath was gone. The cursive sign was gone. The flower beds had been replaced with a vegetable garden. The house Doug and Lori had built their identity inside is now a place where two people I have never met are growing tomatoes. That feels right. Hannah and I talk every Sunday at 11 a.m. Mountain Time. Theo gets on the phone for the last 5 minutes. He calls me Aunt Soph. I am teaching him, very slowly, over FaceTime, how to draw a window with light coming through it. He is 3. His windows are mostly scribbles. I tell him every single time that they are the most beautiful windows I have ever seen. I am working on a series of paintings, now 12 windows. The same theme as the 7th grade portfolio that got me a B+. 12 drawings of windows rendered now as full oil paintings. The view from a moving train, the view from a child's bedroom looking down at a backyard, the view through the front window of Union Station at 2:14 p.m. on a Saturday in October. That last one I have not finished. I work on it 20 minutes at a time. Alex brings me coffee. Max sleeps on the studio floor. There is light in it that I am still learning how to mix. Mrs. Casaluccio, my 7th grade art teacher, passed away in 2019. I tracked down her family in 2021 and sent them a letter and a photograph of the original portfolio she had returned to me with the note. Her daughter Bridget wrote back. She said her mother had kept a folder of students who would matter someday, and that I had been in it. I am going to dedicate the 12 Windows series to her when it shows in 2027. Here is what I want to say to anyone watching this who grew up the way I did. The cruelest people in your life are not always loud. Sometimes they are smiling. Sometimes they are calling their cruelty lessons. They are not raising you. They are training you to absorb harm without complaint. If you are a child watching this, the people who hurt you are wrong about you. The world is full of Marias. The world is full of Mark and Laura Bennetts. The world is full of Ernest Whitfields and Mrs. Casaluccios. You will meet them. They will not look like rescue at first. They will look like people who hand you a glass of water without making you earn it. Take the water. They thought they abandoned me. They just removed themselves from my life. If you've ever felt unwanted by your own family, subscribe. The home you build for yourself, with the people who choose you back, is the only home that ever counted. I was 12 years old when my mother yelled $50 at me from a moving car. I am 32 years old now. I have a studio with my name on the door. I have a husband who has never once raised his voice at me. I have a dog who sleeps on my left foot. I have a sister I am still learning, a nephew who calls me Aunt Soph, 2 parents in Northbrook who chose me before they knew anything about who I would become, and a Marine named Ernest who carried a business card I never had to use. I have a $50 bill that I left on a wooden bench in a courthouse in Joliet, Illinois. I never spent it. I never had to. Because the home Lori bet I couldn't find was not a home. It was a stage. I built a different house, in a different city, with a different name, under a different sky. I am home, Mom, Dad, you lost the bet. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe and join our community for more true life stories. We'll see you in the next one.